Hello, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Tanya Leary. I am a coach, a teacher and an author and founder of TLC, which stands for Tanya Leary Cares, and also Teaching Love and Compassion, which really, if we boil everything down, is, I think, one of the cornerstones of life as we know it and should know it. My professional background is I started working with children at the earliest opportunity that I had as a babysitter, on a volunteer with kids clubs, and then I went on to train as a teacher, working in Tower Hamlets in London, and then I moved into the third sector, working with kids at risk of going into care, and then working latterly with kids that were in care and had moved their way through the care system. So when I became a parent, I left that role and I subsequently trained as a coach, which is what I do now. So I work one-to-one with people, adults and young people, to support them to focus on a goal. And that could be professional, personal, a mixture of the two, health. The goal does not really matter. The more important thing is the why, and the why they want to attain that goal. And I think that any goal becomes a lot more easier to manage and to attain if we treat ourselves with love and compassion. And it becomes easier for us to treat others with love and compassion when we've sort of got a bit of a full cup ourselves. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think that pertains to every single element of our lives. So if we do anything coming from an authentic place, coming from a good place, with love and compassion, then we can mess up, we can make mistakes, but it's more easy to forgive ourselves and be forgiven if people know that it's coming from a sort of genuine and authentic place. So I also have a program for children, which is called TIA, which is Teaching Emotional Awareness and Resilience. And my hope is that eventually kids will be so tooled up and able to recognise and understand their emotions that I'll essentially be like Nanny McPhee and no one will need me, because everyone will have an understanding of why they're feeling the way they're feeling, what tools they've got in their toolkit which will help them manage that and move through it and articulate it to others, so that other people know what they can do to support and assist those other people. So essentially, family and friends will be able to scaffold and support each other because we feel more able to share our own vulnerabilities. And that is a massive ask at the moment, because kind of as a nation we're quite guarded, and as we're seeing at the moment, that isn't really a very healthy place for us to be, and it's causing a lot of mental health difficulties, a lot of anxiety, and it gives people a lot of baggage to carry. So my hope is that by people being brave enough to be open about what they need, it empowers others to be open as well. And everyone just sort of breathes a bit of a sigh of relief, because we can all be a little bit more real about whatever it is we're going through. So that's the plan. So this evening's conversation is basically all of that, with a kind of specific focus on loss and grief and dealing with grief. So I need to say at this juncture that I am not a trained grief counsellor. So this is basically my own experience, my own lived experience of grief and growing through grief, as well as the experiences of people that I've coached, kids that I've taught, kids in care. So it's sort of an amalgamation of what happens when grief is dealt with well, and what happens when it's sort of less well dealt with, and what we can do about that. So my first experience of death was when I was 7, and actually the anniversary is coming up really soon. the day after the Day of the Dead. So my dad died on the 3rd of November 1987 when I was 7 years old and my sister was 8. And he wasn't poorly. There was nothing that came beforehand. So it was a huge, massive shock for the whole family. And yeah, it basically felt like nobody knew what to do, because it wasn't someone old, it wasn't someone sick, it wasn't something expected. And also it was like the early 1980s, so no one was talking about mental health, no one was talking about how to understand children, and everyone was floored, no one knew what to do. So the vicar came round to the house and he said, oh, you know, sometimes God just calls people back, you know, he take basically the good die young. And I was 7 and I was not happy with that. And I raged and I shouted and I screamed. And my grandma, who was grieving the loss of her son, was very embarrassed and ashamed of me because I was disrespecting a vicar and, you know, layers of authority and all of that kind of stuff. So she was very angry at me. So that was very confusing. And everything was a little bit chaotic. On the day of the funeral, our house was rammed with people and nobody knew what to do. And so we were given presents like there was no tomorrow. And that was lovely, absolutely lovely, because people didn't know what to do. So it was like all our Christmases had come at once, which is like, oh, this is amazing, I'm so excited to have a present. Don't forget your dad's dad. And so that was very confusing. He felt guilty for feeling happy. And so that was all a little bit weird, but people were just doing the best with the information that they had at the time. And it is what it is. So we were really lucky because my mum was very, very able to talk to us about how she felt. And she was very open in asking us how we felt. And we grieved together. My mum, my sister and I, we grieved together. And we spoke about my dad, what he would have liked, what he missed, what he would have found funny. And so I feel like I know him, even though I only had a really short period of time with him. But despite all of that, there was still issues, because I didn't always want to talk about it with my mum, because I knew that maybe that would make her sad again. And, you know, as a child, I wanted to protect her. I wanted her to be okay. So I didn't always want to tell her when I was feeling sad, just in case it made her feel sad too. So it's not always possible when a child loses a loved one for the parent or the other people that are grieving to be the only port of call, because a child will, an empathic child will want to support their parents and want to make sure that they're okay and not add to the hurt that they're already feeling. So you may need to look outside of your own circles for that support. When I was 13, I had all my lovely hair cut off. I was very excited because I was becoming a grown-up, and, you know, it was a decision I made myself. And then when I went to sleep that night, I had nightmare after nightmare that when I went to heaven, my dad wouldn't recognize me. So sometimes it can be quite unexpected things that you hadn't accounted for. You know, no one made me have my hair cut. I was happy with the decision, but then it was a big shock afterwards. So grief isn't always a linear path. There is an expectation of how grief generally moves through you, but it isn't always linear, and you can jump ahead and you can fall back, and that's the same for children as well. And in some cases they call it puddle jumping, because children can go really quickly from, so grandma's died, what's going to happen to her body? Anyway, when are we going out for dinner? And as a parent or as a grown-up, it can be quite challenging to stay on top of where your child is with that emotion, and knowing knowing that it's not linear is a bit of a release for the other people involved, because it means that, oh, okay, it doesn't mean that they're not sad, they're not thinking about it anymore, or that we've passed that stage. It just means that because all their neural pathways are developing, they're sometimes thinking about it, sometimes sad, sometimes absolutely not even on their agenda. And you need to sort of try and stay up to date with that, which is really challenging and can be quite emotionally difficult for you as the adult. So I have made it my business with my own children to make sure that talking about life and death is just run of the mill, very run of the mill. And we use terms like the circle of life, and we relate things to seasons, so that there is no expectation and no shock factor when you're thinking about life and death. It's something that is referred to often, and not in a serious, we're going to have a big conversation about this. It's just, it is a part of life. It happens to everyone. It happens to everything. You know, autumn is a brilliant time of year to start conversations like this, because, you know, the leaves are dying, they're falling off the trees, they'll decompose back in the earth, and they will give life again, so that next season they will have given something back to the earth and things can start again. But before anyone starts thinking about talking to children about grief and loss and death, there needs to be some sort of understanding for you in terms of what does it mean for you. So do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in an afterlife? Or what will you be basing your conversations on with your children? And if you don't know, that is perfectly okay, because sometimes people have a very, very clear idea, and for other people it's a lot more fluid. But it's beneficial to have something solid to hold on to, so that you've got a base to talk to with your children about. But it is very, very valuable to be able to say, I'm not sure, I don't know, we might have to find that out together, or anything that you feel comfortable with, which is honest, but is not leaving them sort of floundering. So yeah, there's all sorts of practicalities around life and death, and how that manifests itself in families. Some people don't have to deal with it for, you know, until children are teenagers, but talking about death, I think, is really, really valuable, because it's an amazing reminder that we're not dead. You know, the very fact that we can have this conversation means that we're not dead. So it is gives us the option to kind of think, I'm not dead yet, so is this the life that I'm happy leading? Am I treating people in a way that I'd be happy to be remembered? It's an opportunity to say thank you, I'm sorry, I love you, or anything like that. And until we're dead, we've got an opportunity to change, which I think is really amazing and really exciting. And because people often, understandably, get really bogged down in the idea of, oh my gosh, this is really, really sad, they don't think of but we're not there yet, oh my God, this is an amazing opportunity. So I think because of the jobs that I've done, the life experience that I've had, my belief is that there's no bad time to share your feelings and to be honest about how you feel. So if death and grief can teach us something, It's that don't wait to tell someone that you love them or you miss them or you're sorry or you screwed up and you regret that don't wait, because one of the biggest issues around grief is guilt and resentment, and what's been left unsaid. And so a great way to avoid that is by making sure that you do what's within your power and will feed you and nurture you. So I'm not asking anyone to, you know, forgive experiences that were very difficult and unhealthy. I'm not asking anyone to try and fix somebody else, because that's not on you, that's on them. But if there's a trait of someone that you love and you enjoy, then let them know. If someone has brought value to your life, don't wait to say it, because none of us know how long we've got, and no one's life is worse by being told that they're loved. So that, I think that's something really valuable and something important to consider. And when we've been visiting the Day of the Dead sort of celebration, it's all about remembering and memorial and things like that. And now we're in a situation where the world is very strange and we are not seeing people that we would usually be seeing. We're not having the same kind of physical contact that we would normally be having. That is a sort of loss and a sort of grief that no one was prepared for and no one was anticipating. So now is a lovely opportunity to say that loss isn't just death, it's the loss of a routine, it's the loss of what was your normal, it's the loss of being close with friends and family. So it's an opportunity to tell people that you're grieving that closeness and you miss them in that way. Yeah, so that's that element of it. So because of COVID at the moment, that's what's really brought this into sharp relief. And when Diana and I were talking about the celebration of the Day in the Dead and the remembering of people, I was very aware that some people won't have experience of traditional grief. And so we've expanded it into all kinds of loss, because any form of loss, anything that feels like you're missing something, can result in feelings of grief. And for some people that might sound like it's an overreaction, or, you know, this is, you know, you'll be able to see them again in X amount of time. But in this moment, this is the experience that we're living. And so this grief, especially for children and young people who have got less of an understanding of what's going on, they are experiencing real, genuine feelings of grief. And grief is just an emotional response to a loss. And if you have an emotional response, there's very likely, if you don't understand it, to be physical reactions. So your child might be angry, sad, they might be aggressive, they might be frightened, they might be blaming themselves. And if you think of those as the actions that you can physically see, they are a representation of what's beneath that. So they're like when the volcano blows, but we need to consider, right, that's what we can see. What is beneath it? Are they grieving? Is it because they've lost something and they're sad without it? They've lost something and they're frightened they'll never get it back. So try and consider what is beneath the physical reaction that you can see, because that's only ever the end result and it's not the root. So what we're trying to get to is the root, so that we can understand and discuss it. So ways in which that can be looked at and dealt with is always, always, always my starter is talking openly and honestly. And often as parents or friends or anyone that's got empathy for somebody else, but particularly when we're dealing with younger people, if we see them feeling sad or cross or frustrated, we try and cajole them out of it and move them through it. But sometimes it's really, really, really logical. You know, if a child is used to going to school and seeing their best friend at school every day and giving them a cuddle, and they're no longer able to do that, then that is a loss. And so a very, very sensible, logical response is that they miss that and they feel sad. And if our natural response is, I'm your mum, I want to make you feel better, I'm going to try and move you into a good mood straight away, the danger of that is that they then feel, I cannot show that I'm feeling sad. I cannot honestly share my emotions because it makes mummy or daddy feel uncomfortable, or they need me to feel happy all the time. When sometimes the most obvious thing for us to do is to say, this sucks, this really sucks, tell me more, and just pull their string and ask them, how does that feel for you? You know, what could we do to show the other person that you miss them? So if it's a friend that they're not seeing, could they write a letter? Could they draw a picture? Could they send a voice note? You know, what can they do that's going to acknowledge that feeling and share it safely with someone else? Because sometimes, and we've all discussed this previously, you need to sit with an emotion and just accept that at the moment I feel shit, and the reason that I do is because this is shit. And giving yourself that time and that space to sit with it helps you. So we have to, as the adults, do the uncomfortable thing of sitting in the sadness with our child and either talking with them about it or allowing them to not talk about it, but letting them take the lead on that. But this is why communication in a family, as soon as you possibly can, is so valuable with children. Because a funny thing happened to me in the supermarket once. I was with both of my children and they were really little, but they just started to not be in the trolley anymore, so they were walking, and I said, oh, turn left at the bottom of the aisle. And this man, he was clearly in the mood for giving people his opinion, asked for or not, went as if they know their left from their right. Well, of course they don't know their left from their right, of course they don't. Well, what do you want me to do? Like, wait until they're 7, 8, 9 and they know it before I start saying it? How are they? It's chicken and egg, isn't it? You know, if you keep saying left and keep showing them which is left, then eventually they'll know their left from their right. If you keep going like that, look, this makes an L with your thumb and finger. Oh, then they'll know their left from their right. And it's the same with anything. It's the same with anything. You cannot wait until they are 11, 12, 13 and you're thinking, they're going to high school. Oh my God, I'm really worried that they'll be exposed to stuff that they've never been exposed to before. Better start talking, because that is at a time when they are trying for their own health and safety to gain some independence and some distance from you. So we cannot wait until they're old enough to have conversations with children. We need to normalize talking about our feelings and our emotions and our tricky things as soon as we can, because if we leave it until society says they're old enough, there's already a period of time that's been missed. And you go gently. It's not a big serious sit down at the table and everyone have sad serious faces. It's I feel really excited today, and for me that feels like a fizzy tummy, or it feels like I want to dance, or it feels like. So all the time in normal everyday life we are sharing how our emotions have physical manifestations. Just so this is just something that happens, and then when something bigger like loss or grief or sadness comes up, we're used to having conversations about emotions and the way that they make us feel physically and the way that they make us feel in our heads. And so it's just something that we do. When we feel something, we explain to people we trust how that looks for us. But yeah, you don't wait until a child is run over to tell them how to cross a road safely. You don't do it. It's chicken and egg. Start little with things that are easy, and then you go gently, Bentley. And then as emotions get bigger and more difficult, it isn't I'm dealing with a difficult emotion and now I'm trying to sort of explain it as well. Oh, too much. So does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So often if we're talking about loss and grief here in the case of someone that has died, honesty, I think, is a very, very valuable tool, because historically, when people have died, this happens all the time, happens with celebrities, happens constantly. When someone dies, they become perfect. And that's not real. And children are not stupid. And so if when someone dies, and Auntie Maud dies, no one ever mentions the fact that she smelled like cats and she only ever offered you 1 cup of tea even though you were at the house for 9 hours and things like that. They will still be thinking those things, but they'll feel like guilty for thinking them. You know, I think I must be a bad person because I'm remembering, you know, when she annoyed me, when she shouted, when do you know what I mean? Someone doesn't become a saint just because they've passed away. Doesn't happen. So to keep the memories real and to enable children to know that people are multidimensional, it's really important to say, oh God, can you remember that time we were there for like half a day and we had to share 1 cookie between all of us? Oh my God. Or, you know, when I'm not saying be disrespectful, but children remember the craziest of things. And so if we minimize who that person was just to make it more palatable, then they may swallow, but she was so annoying when she did X, or I really didn't like it when she and didn't she smell funny, and feel too guilty to mention those emotions. So remember the person as a whole. all the lovely things, all the amazing things, all the stuff that you learned. But let's not pretend that any individual that's ever been alive has been perfect, because that's not true, and it makes people less able to be honest about their mistakes, and that's not really a healthy place to be. So my grandma, I loved my grandma very, very much, but I'm telling you now that she never ever completed a dishwashing exercise when she was at our house ever. Every time, I need a wee, I'll be back in a minute. Never finished the dishes ever. And so now as a family, we can remember that really fondly, instead of me feeling like, yeah, but bloody hell, that was annoying, wasn't it? Because we all remember it as one of her personality traits, you know? So it's a way of being open and honest. I think that a really valuable way to mark someone's death is to do something like Day of the Dead, and, you know, eat the food that they would have liked, drink the drinks that they would have liked, read the books, watch the films, talk about them, laugh with them, and all of that kind of stuff, and mark them in a enjoyable, open, it's okay to laugh, it's okay to cry, it's okay to not feel sad. And you cannot, as a grown-up, as a child, you cannot force someone to feel sad on a certain day just because it's that day, you know? So it's important that it's okay to say, I know it's Daddy's birthday today, but I've had an amazing day, and to not have any guilt attached to a day, because sometimes a smell or a look or a song will catch you off guard on a random day, and that's more important, to be able to acknowledge that feeling and emotion in the moment, rather than feel like, don't forget, got to be sad on the 3rd of November, because you can't force that. It's nonsensical. But maybe having a place to go to for some people is helpful, or having a song or a word that you say that lets people know that you're thinking about them in that moment, so that they can just get a bit of time out and get a bit of space, is really helpful. And in this specific period of time, COVID, all of that sort of bigger arrangement has been messed around a bit, and so it's not so possible for families to grieve and to get together and reminisce in the way that they would have. So if you're experiencing your own loss at the moment, then you may have to, just as a family unit, do something independently yourself. So maybe planting a tree, going to the beach, choosing something that would be pertinent to that person and also meaningful for the kids, because the normal is not so accessible at the moment. But it may be a physical thing that you want to hang on to, like the planting of a tree or something like that, so that this is a time related to, we're going to do this today. Anytime you want to feel sad, anytime you want to talk, that's okay, but this is a place, or this is something that we can do to remember that person. We were talking before, Diana and I were talking before, about how if you are not the people that have experienced the loss, so you're kind of talking to your child about someone else experiencing loss, how you can be the scaffold for the people that are closer. So if they've In our school recently, you know, someone's lost a dad. So that is not our grief, but we're aware of the other people that need support. So this is like a really good opportunity to kind of show how we are empathic, how we help and support other people. And this is a really clear example of how different people grieve, and you need to take your lead from the people at the center of that. So in the same way as when you lose someone, you're looking to see how your child needs you to respond. Do they need you to sit with them? Do they need to talk about it? You're taking your lead and asking them what they would like and being solid. If you and your family are further out from that, and you are going to be sort of wanting to provide additional support for them, we need to take our lead from them. So my recent experience is that they don't want anyone to ask their child about it in school, because she doesn't want to be caught off guard. She wants to be able to talk about it herself, but only if she is the person to mention it, because that is her safety net at the moment. If I'm bringing it up, then I'm in control of it, but I don't want to think that at any stage someone might mention my dad. So we need to take our lead from the people that are closest to the grief. But I would say that from an empathic point of view, you know, it's good to take a meal round, send a card, let them know that you're available, and then take your lead from them. Because although we're trying to ensure that people know that it's okay to talk, that's for them to do. We can't be the instigators necessarily. We can ask if they're okay. We can make ourselves available. We can be clear that we're comfortable having those conversations. But we take our lead from the kind of core grievers, if that makes sense. So when you are experiencing grief alongside your child, there will probably be occasions when you're dealing with your adult and likely more complex emotions, and it can be challenging when your child is kind of puddle jumping in and out of theirs. So having the awareness of what's going on for them does make things easier, but you need to kind of be aware that you're going to need your own support network outside of that, and you might need to look at your grief separately, and if possible get some time outside of being with them. Because whilst you can be honest that you're sad, honest that you don't know the answers, honest that, you know, everyone is eventually going to die, and all of that being age appropriate and all of that, sometimes our grief is so significant that we're not going to manage to hold it all together and stay safe for them if we don't have some time out and some time away from them, able to navigate it and seek additional support. And that is something else that's difficult in COVID whilst we're being isolated. So I have got a resource sheet which talks about services that are available and what you can do. But we're in a very different time than we would normally be, because a massive part of grief, grieving, moving through is sharing your experience with other people that love them, particularly if it's something that's happened recently. So the normal process of traditional grieving in the West has been really curtailed at the moment by COVID. So talking, writing, seeking support by telephone, speaking to friends and relatives and stuff over the phone, seeking support professionally or from grief charities is really important, because if you're not going through that process in the normal way, then it's probable that you'll get stuck, because you're not doing all the steps that would sort of enable you to get through to the other side of life's different, life's sad, but I feel like I've had the opportunity to share, to grieve, to be with my family and friends, and that sort of element of the process has been kind of removed, or at the very least kind of curtailed. So that needs addressing at the moment in a different way. Yeah, and that's quite challenging. So how else can we support our child? I have already said that it's really important for them to know, however they are feeling, that's okay, and you might just need to sit with them in that experience. And if they're old enough, or if you feel like this question would work for them, ask them what they need from you. What do they need from you in this moment? Is it a cuddle? Is it a story? Is it to sleep in your bed? What do they need from you in that moment? And given that opportunity, often children can give you an indication of what it is that they need. So they might be more clingy because they're worried that you're going to leave. They might be more distant because they don't want to be so attached if you do. But it's really, really important that we bear in mind that the way that they are acting is a manifestation of the way that they're feeling, because that makes us more able to respond as opposed to react. So yeah, the stages of grief that we've been talking about are initial shock, then accepting that your loss is real, the situation is what it is and it's not going to be reversed, experiencing that pain of grief and all of the other myriad of emotions that go with it, adjusting to life. And this is where we're a little bit stuck at the moment, because when you're talking about death and loss in the very traditional sense, then you're adjusting to life knowing that things are never going to be the same again. But when we're talking about a loss of routine, a loss of friendship group, a significant change in circumstances, we're not in a position to make any promises or any statements really as to what things are going to look like going forwards. So we need to be the constant, but we also need to share that we're doing our best, and we don't have 100% of the answers, but we are here and we are your constant, and you can rely on mummy and daddy. And eventually, hopefully, in traditional grief, time will pass and you'll be able to put more energy into normal life and everyday life than you're putting into your grief. But as I was saying before, those stages aren't necessarily linear, and they can be impacted by anniversaries, celebration times, seeing other people and reliving past experiences. So those experiences aren't necessarily linear. So yeah, it might feel quite chaotic. It might feel quite out of control. And we, as the adult, need to be the steadying force, and it is our responsibility to seek support outside if we need to, and we probably will. Grief is massive, and it can be all consuming, and it can last for years. So it is likely and normal that we will need to talk about it with friends, talk about it with family, talk about it with counsellors or whatever. Revisit stuff that we thought we'd dealt with, remember new things, question old things. So all of that is normal and to be expected. Feeling angry, feeling cheated, all of that is normal, and we're feeling those whilst potentially also trying to manage a really little person that's trying to deal with them as well. So what we're trying to do is create a toolkit that the family can use, and also that your little one can use themselves. But the basis of that toolkit is shared experience and talking. And that's going to be the roots of the grieving process. Taking the lead from your child. But it is okay for them to see you sad and not sure. And it's okay for them to see you happy and not constantly consumed by it, because that is life. That's the process that we're all going through. So I've got a resource sheet which indicates some stuff that will be helpful. But the main thing is that you revisit, that you share with other people and explain as far as you can what you have found helpful for your child, so that other people can get involved in the support and the scaffolding. But yeah, I can't encourage you to talk early enough about loss, about life, about death, because you don't want that first conversation to be at a time when someone really close has been lost. You're dealing with an actual death, you're dealing with shock, and you're dealing with having this conversation for the first time. But happily, we've got some films that will help you to talk about these topics. So lots and lots of kids films and Disney films and books and stories deal with death, and some of them do it in quite a dark and scary way. And the reason that we've got people having nightmares about stepmothers is because in nearly every early Disney film it was like, oh, they had a mum and then they died, oh, they had a dad and then he died. And it's just that, and then someone really horrible came into your life to take them over. Oh, amazing. So death is basically the end of any child having a happy time. Brilliant. And it doesn't need to be that at all. So some that deal with it in a more healthy way are Moana, which is a personal favorite film of mine. And we did this as a family when we watched Moana. the grandmother, who describes herself as the village crazy lady, which I'm all over that. She says, when I die, I'm going to come back as one of these. And she's pointing to a stingray. And so she's already raising with Moana, I'm going to die, but I won't be gone. You know, I'll still be around. And then after she has died, her spirit can be seen in the stingray that gags Moana. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't seen it, sorry about that. But that opens a conversation as to, what do you think happens when you die? Do you think your spirit comes back? If you died and you could come back as any animal, what would you come back as? So it's opening a conversation and saying, this happens and it doesn't need to be the absolute end. So, and it's also beginning a conversation as to, well, lots of people hope there's a heaven. Lots of people believe in absolutely nothing. Nobody knows the absolute answer. But being a stingray sounds pretty cool to me. And it just makes things slightly less, well, that's the end of it, and a little bit less scary. And it means that you're getting used to the idea that even though someone physically isn't there, it doesn't mean that the bond is broken and that relationship is lost. Coco, which is the film that led Diana and I to talk about the Day of the Dead, is very much about the importance of remembering, honouring, and talking in happy tones about people that have died, because it's so often only relating to, oh, we miss them so much, oh, this is so sad. And sometimes the value and the life that they brought to us and the joy that they brought to us is lost in the sadness. And so Coco, talking about the quality of the lives that people had, is a lovely way and a nice way to ask kids what they remember about people that they've loved. Harry Potter obviously is talking about death in lots of different guises all the time, and that's for older children. But the importance there is that Harry obviously grows up without his parents, and Dumbledore is very much reminding Harry that, you know, when people have died, that they're still around, they're still, you know, they still have got a very, very strong love for us. But what we cannot do, and what no one should do, is try and live their lives to make the other people happy. You know, your life is your own, and you cannot try and live your life to please other people, and you need to be your own person. So there are other films that I've mentioned, but they are kind of more appropriate for teenagers and slightly wouldn't really work here. There are also some books which I think are really helpful and beautiful, which I'll put in the links. But one is called The Invisible String, which again is very much about bonds, even when people are physically not here anymore. The Goodbye Book, and No Matter What, but I have got a resource sheet with this on, Frankie. There's two things that I do think are important, which don't necessarily fit in detail into this talk, because we're talking about how to support our children through death. But there are also really, really important practical points that we all need to think about in relation to life and death. And I think that because we're so keen to not talk about death at all, people don't consider them. But encouraging people to talk about death, talk about the practicalities of death, talk about the admin of death when they're alive and when they're healthy and when it is absolutely not urgent, is one of the most valuable things that I can tell anyone to do. Because my life, my sister's life, my mum's life would have been significantly difficult. That's difficult and different in one word. If my dad hadn't had a will and hadn't had life insurance and hadn't talked to my mum about what he wanted after he died. So I know that all sounds very yeah, well, that can wait, but I think that when you are in the midst of grief, you don't want a whole load of life admin to deal with as well. And you don't want the rage of annoyance that someone didn't bother to sort that out for you before they died. So one of the most important things that I can recommend anyone to do is to sort their life admin out, because that just takes a whole layer of worry and stress and anguish out of a really horrible time. So doing all the boring, where's your will, what's your password, what do you want to happen to your Facebook account, doing all of that stuff when it is absolutely non-urgent is mega important. Because when you're trying to deal with, how am I going to tell my kid, how am I going to get through the next day, how am I going to keep breathing, you don't also want to be thinking, shit, how am I going to pay the mortgage? So I think that, whilst it sounds like it's got nothing to do with this, is the most important piece of life advice that I can give anyone. But helpfully, I've got a TED talk on that written in the resource notes. So that is about the size of it. I've been much more articulate in my resources sheet, but life and death are going to happen to everyone, come what may, and there is no getting around that. But we cannot expect our children to know how to navigate grief and navigate that feeling if they don't understand what their other emotions are. So if we are not talking to our children about feelings and emotions and behaviours and how they can manage the way that they feel day to day, and that some days they'll be up and some days they'll be down and some days they'll fall out with their friends, some days it'll be the best day ever. And what we want to do is give them as many words as we possibly can for feeling happy, feeling excited, feeling sad, feeling lonely, feeling isolated, feeling bullied. We want to give them such a rich tapestry of words so that they can describe the way that they feel for any situation that they face, that when it comes to death or loss or grief, it is just one of those things. But we cannot expect our children to be able to navigate grief if they cannot navigate the other stuff. So what we need to do is be talking to our children about when they feel happy, when they feel excited, when they feel sad, when they feel nervous, when they feel angry. We feel a million feelings every day, and they will only be amplified when something significant like death and loss happens. So if we do the work beforehand with the easier stuff, then the bigger stuff also becomes easier to navigate. So essentially, I could have saved you all 50 minutes of your time by saying, talk to your children about the way that they feel every day. That's it. So yeah, there you go, that's it.
Frances, did you have any questions for Tanya?
I think, and it was really useful actually. It was really good to kind of like Yeah, because I think that we do that in our house. We kind of talk about things we've kind of had to because of we had a little boy that was stillborn, Tanya knows, and so that's always just been a conversation that we've like had to have from a very early age. And we do, it's quite nice, you know, what the things you're saying around like having a day where you honor them and do things that you think they would have liked, and we very much do that. And so it's been quite nice to kind of hear some stuff talking about it and link it to things that we've done and know that that's healthy stuff to do, because you question yourself and you think, oh gosh, should we have just like kept this from them? Sometimes I think, should we have just kept this from them? And it would have been a lot more straightforward, because there's been lots of really tricky conversations, and then like, you know, tricky situations with other people where they've said to me, oh goodness me, they were talking to me about this and I didn't know what to say, and you know, I think okay. But yeah, I'm glad that we do, we have addressed it in that way, because from what you're saying, you know, that's the healthy way to go about it.
It's a really healthy way to deal with it. And it's sometimes so hard for you, especially if you're just going about your business cooking some beans or whatever, and then they come in with a question.
Oh yeah.
You're not quite ready for it, because children don't wait for an appropriate time, do they, to ask questions. So it's important that they see that that people are navigating the way that they feel and trying to explain that all the time. But you know, also your loss means that you have, because we've spoken about this before, you know, talked about how special and how precious they are, you know. And so they not only know that you've loved and lost, but you love them, and they are so precious, because just because someone is born doesn't mean that they get to stay for any length of time. You know, nothing is promised. And so they will be more aware of other people's emotions and other people's life experiences, because you've been honest about yours. So that will make them more aware and more empathic. So that's really good.
I have got a question, actually. It's a tricky one, but how would you respond to questions around like you potentially, so because my daughter is quite aware of it, she has at times got quite upset about the fact that one day I will die, and asked me those questions like, what if you die before me, mummy? Or, you know, those kind of things. Oh, it's really, really hard, because I've just tried to kind of say that most people die when they're older, and hopefully I will die when I'm older, and tried not to kind of make too many promises that I'm not going to die, but also kind of promise that I'm not going to die. Do you know what I mean? I do. Yeah. It's really hard questions. Yeah. So any pointers?
Yes, so you're doing all the right things there. So you can't make a promise, but you can, you know, without turning into an absolute scientist about it, you can say, you know, statistically, that, you know, most people in the Western world, most people in the UK live until they're 80, 85, 90, and you can use examples, you can point to examples in your own family, or, you know, your own loved ones, and say, and the reason that I, you know, go out for regular walks, the reason that I try and eat and drink really healthily is because I want to be around for you for as long as I can. That's why I do all these things, because I love you so much. I want to be here for as long as I can. But everyone in the world dies, because if they didn't, there'd be no room for everyone. There wouldn't be room for everyone to live forever. But I will be with you as long as I'm allowed to be. And, you know, and then you'll judge if that's enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are absolutely right to not make promises, but you can reinforce the idea that, you know, as long as it's in your control, you'll be here as long as you can be here.
Yeah, and I talk about, you know, around healthy and stuff. It's really hard to kind of, you just want to say, I'm gonna die. Do you know what I mean? You just want to give them that promise, don't you?
Yeah.
It's so hard, really hard. But yeah, thank you.
But yeah, no promises, but look for the evidence. You know, all around us is evidence that people live for a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You know, you've got a lot to navigate, but by being open and being honest, and if you're being open and honest is always the best way, and you know your children, and you will be able to know when to go a little bit further, when to pull back. But there is I did have there's a lovely have I spoken to you about this book before? Ask Me His Name.
No, I don't think so. I'll make a note of it.
Yeah, so there is a book written by a lady called Ellie Wright.
Right.
And she lost her son when he had only been alive for an extremely short period of time. And she feels that it's really important to honour him and to value the fact that he is and was a part of their life. And so she wants people to speak his name and to ask about him, because, you know, everyone has left a footprint on our hearts. Everyone is shaping the conversations that we have with our family, with our friends, with our children. So Diana and I were talking about this before. When someone has lost someone that they love, you can't remind them of that. By asking them how they are, you can't remind them. That's already happened. That's already in their heart every minute. So you sharing that you care can't make it worse, really. But you need to be mindful of the relationship that you have with that person and just trust your gut in that situation. But I'm pointing at that because that's where my notes are. But I would recommend that you.
I'll have looked at that book, because I've bought different ones over the years and then looked at them and not been quite, like, it's just how you feel and how it fits with how you want to talk about it a little bit as well. So I'll look for that one as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I have got other books and podcasts and things like that I would recommend, but I will send that on to both of you, because it's it's a lot to digest, so you might want to read that in your own time. So yeah, that's about the size of it, really. I'll send that on in the next few days. But if you've got any other questions or any feedback or any of your own experiences that you want to share, then do feel free to do that as well. So yeah, Diana, have you got any questions?
Well, I thought your idea of like the puddle jumping was quite interesting, because it kind of contextualized something for me that I had witnessed, but also kind of raised another specter of how would you know when someone is coming out of grief, like if like in my own life I've lost quite a few people, and I think for some people it's almost like I've somehow become like that doesn't affect me anymore, and I don't want to sound cold, but when I talk about people that I lost when I was a young person, like like my grandparents and things like that, like I don't have that same trigger. But for instance, there was a friend of mine who I lost, who was quite young, and for her loss it can sometimes be quite sharp, and I've always rationalized it as, in my head, like with a lot of the people who died quite old, you kind of can say, oh, they've had their lives, they've fulfilled their existence, whereas with her there's all that promise, that pain that this is tied to it. But I guess going back to the idea of the puddle jumping, I feel like that as an adult sometimes when I've dealt with grief, in the sense that you can be fine for really long periods of time, and then something strange will hit you and you're like, why am I crying? And I think, yeah, I think it's a really good conversation to have, because otherwise you become judgmental of other people's, why they're acting the way that they are, like, oh, they're not grieving, or oh, they're not, you know.
And yeah, and there's so many different experiences, isn't there? Because, you know, sometimes people are dying for so long that basically by the time they get to the end point, you feel like your grief is already kind of 3/4 of the way through, you know, because you've been aware of it, you've planned for it, you've grieved a little bit with them, and then there's the relief at the end that they're no longer in pain, etc., etc. Whereas sometimes if they're young, if it's a shock, if it's unexpected, there's all of that untapped potential, all of the ideas of what you thought was coming that have then been stolen from you. And so you are then grieving that at every different juncture, you know. And some days obviously it comes more than others. So I think grief is just a lifelong journey that you have to navigate. But you don't stop navigating it if you stop talking about it. You're just navigating it in a more lonely place without a map.
But like with someone like your father, like I lost my father, I think 5 years ago now, and I've come to terms with it. You know, I'm not, like, if I hear a song that he would have liked, I just think in my head, oh, he would have liked that, but I don't, you know, get emotional and things like that. So is there in the grief process a natural kind of more steady place, like almost like a remission, essentially, where
I think that depends on a lot of different things. So like where they were in their life, what your relationship was with them, how robust you're feeling in the moment that song comes on the radio, how much you feel they missed out on, there's a lot. Because my main sadness now is that my children don't know my dad. That's my main sadness, that he hasn't met his grandchildren and they've missed out on him. So I missed out on him when I was a child, but I'm an adult now, and you know, I'm okay. And I just feel a bit like, oh, that would have been nice, wouldn't it? But I talk to my children about him, you know, a lot, and about my grandma a lot, and about other people that have been very precious to us, kind of a lot. So it's less it's often, not all the time, but often it's less visceral than it was. Yeah, but I do certainly get the kind of, you know, my grandma was like 97, so you know, 97, that's a long life to live. So I think that was good. And because of my own previous experience of grief, I think, do you know what, I told her that I loved her. I told her of all the occasions that I'd enjoyed with her. I painted her nails when she couldn't do it herself. I made sure that I gave everything that I could to that relationship. And so now she is not here, I feel like, you're not here, but I did what I could when you were. It's like, if you are in a position to tell someone and share with someone the way that you feel about them, then you are less likely to feel hurt, guilty, and stuck after someone has died, because you have done what it is in your power to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I'm a big believer in like living eulogies. You know, if someone's dead and then you've written an amazing poem about them, slightly late. Why don't you just tell them now? But obviously we can't go around 24/7 wearing our hearts on our sleeves. You know, we have got shopping and stuff to do. We've got lives to lead. So you need to be slightly practical about it. But yeah, I think there's space and time for a bit of gush from now and again. That would be that's my takeaway from today. Make a note of it. Time for a bit of gush. Right, ladies, it is 8 minutes to 10. So that was not 30 minutes. I'm very sorry about that. Yeah, if you've got any more questions, if you've got any feedback, if you want to know any more or tell me any more, then you're very, very welcome to do so. I will send you the resource sheet before the end of the week for sure. But yeah, that's all my knowledge and information about loss, grief, emotions, supporting children.
That's great, Tanya. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very,
Tanya.
very welcome. Thank you
you.
very much for hosting. And